Salam everyone. Offer my loving and humble pranams at Swami's lotus feet. It is very good to be talking to all of you today and meeting all of you through this medium. So while I was thinking what I should be speaking about, I thought I will talk about episodes and reflect on moments that happened during my time in Vrindavan and later that sort of redefined the definition or meaning of Swami to me. Of course, growing up as a child, when you're naughty, your elders tell you off by saying, if you behave this way, then Lord Muruga or Subramanya will come and poke your eyes, as though he didn't have any other better job to do other than poking children's eyes. But, when you kind of grow up and when I would say the general environment is very different, people's understanding are different, I would say the fear of God rather than the fear of sin was more in certain cases, right? But what Swami did to me right from Balikas or right from my childhood through the time in Vrindavan was very different, and I thought I'd just reflect on some of those moments today. And just to warn you, these are not going to be blockbuster experiences like what Shikhar would have shared. I remember when I went to Vrindavan, when I was sitting and listening to some of the teachers share experiences, one would come and say, Swami, there was a chromic acid that went into my eyes, or sulfuric acid went into my eyes, and Swami gave me my eyesight. Someone else will come and say, Swami came and said, cancer is cancelled, and that would be gone, and lots of those things. And it used to make me wonder, oh my God, like these are like blockbuster episodes and I don't have any. And at one point it actually drove me into thinking that I should probably pray for Swami to give me something and cure it so that I can share with people, right? But upon reflecting a bit more, it did tell me a few things that in some cases Swami, due to our prarabdha karma or whatever, we go through certain things and Swami comes and gives us a helping hand. But in many other cases, Swami prevents us from going through many things, and he doesn't acknowledge or tell us anything about that. The loving mother that he is, many times he would prevent many things from happening to all of us. He's the one who's guarding, guiding, and protecting all of us. And in many cases, we wouldn't even know that something should have happened, that he just simply protected, and he wouldn't even tell us, right? And that is how loving he is, and someone who doesn't even expect any form of recognition. So looking at those things, I thought I'll kind of narrate few episodes that showed, I would say, where from my perspective that focus more on the physical aspect of the Lord rather than the divine aspect. Of course, Swami would sometimes come to the portico, and once it so happened that I was sitting, and then there was a small boy, one of the other school children probably, sitting right next to me. Swami came and told him, hey, shall I make you into a girl? Right? He just came and said, hey, shall I make you into a girl? Then he was really shocked, and he said, no, Swami. He was really scared. What will happen if he all of a sudden walks out of Kulantal as a girl, right? But all of us sitting around him started laughing. And he was the only one who's probably, sweating inside, but we were all having a good laugh. And then Swami kind of looked at, all of us looked at him and told something, which is very profound, but Swami makes it very simple, right? Swami then said, if Swami wants, I can make you into a girl, I can make a girl into a boy, I can transform sky into earth and earth into sky. And he just told that and he went away. And people like me, out of utter ignorance, were just, looking at the other boy and saying, hey, Swami cracked a joke at you and, look at you and all that, but not realizing that Swami, the Lord, just walked out, made a very profound statement and walked back in without any fuss, right? And when you kind of reflect back, it kind of tells you how sort of big that moment was when the Lord comes and declares that he can do anything and walks away without creating a fuss, right? So it is those type of things that actually fascinated me about Swami, rather than kind of, I would say, him turning sky into earth or earth into sky, but the more fact about him coming and making it so simple for us to understand and making it easy and approachable. And I'm sure when you listen or chant to Narayana Upanishad, There are certain verses that go by saying Adashta Narayana, Urdashta Narayana. And Swami also says that, right? I'm below you, above you, beside you, in you, around you, and all that. And when you kind of read and listen to that, it all kind of makes sense. But how do I kind of experience that? And that is basically what Swami showed us, in that time that he spent physically on this planet. He allowed us to sort of understand and experience all those profound words. So once, and I'll tell you a few episodes that, made him feel a part of us, made him feel a part of a family. It kind of removed that distance that we often associate ourselves between us and God. We try to sort of put God on a pedestal and say, oh, God is there. We do, puja to him, and then he does something for us in return or whatever. Or maybe in more realized souls, and unlike me, it would be God would be the destination or God would be the goal, right? But there were many times when Swami makes it appear as though he's just a part of us. He's just one amongst us. And I'll talk about one episode that happened in Patti. This was around 2007 or 8. It was during the alumni meet there. And by then I used to sort of teach over here as well in my university. And I was just sort of sitting with a couple of my classmates, and I was sharing some of my thoughts while waiting for Swami. And I was just telling them that, hey, look here, when I'm teaching, and if any of the student interrupts me and says, hey, I've got a question, I'd feel so delighted. I'm like, wow, people are listening to me. It seems to be that the message is reaching them. And I'd be very happy to answer their question. But if the same person gets up and asks the same question again, then I'd be like, okay, fine. Perhaps I didn't explain it properly. Let me give it another shot. I'll try and say the same thing again, and so on. But if the same person asks me the same question again, yet again for the third time, I'd get a bit restless and say, okay, this should be the last one. Let me try and tell him something again, and let's see what happens. But if they ask me for the fourth time, I would say my fuse would blow off, and I'd just tell him or her off to say, what is this? Are you crying, making a joke, or what? Are you a fool or what? You must be a fool not to understand. And my fuse will go off. I'll get so angry, I would just react that way. But when you look at Swami, he would give discourses about, how we are not the body, we are not the mind, the world is not important, he is the goal and all that. And he would just finish like an hour long of discourse, or he would say many things and he would just walk away. And someone like me would get up and say, Swami, my leg is paining, right? Or my leg is hurting. Or someone else would get up and say, Swami, I need more money, But never has once Swami told, hey, just 2 minutes ago, I told these are not important. Why don't you reflect on it for some time and at least ask me later on, right? Never has he actually, scolded or absconded anyone. But even after all that, delivery of messages and, making us understand all that, when someone as ignorant as me would get up and say, ask for trivial things just after, he's never really, frowned or, put us off. He basically would go away and say, bless everyone, and respond in a very loving manner. And that was what amazed me, for, someone like me, if a student asked me the same question 3 or 4 times, I would get so wild. But for Swami, people asking the same thing again and again and again and again and so on, but never has he actually lost his, patience or, his cool, if I were to use that word. So, and then I just finished narrating this, and then and remember, I was using, when I go back, I was using this word fool very, very kind of prominently. And then just after we finished, Swami came in for darshan in the Kulwant Hall. He went away, went onto the stage, and he started the discourse after a bit. Then he gave an hour-long discourse. And then at the end, I've never seen something like this in Kulwant Hall. At the end, Swami paused. This was before he started a bhajan, right? Swami paused and he looked at everyone in Kulwant Hall and asked, do you have any questions, right? And of course, the whole hall was silent. And then Swami said, even then, even now, if you have any questions, you're a fool, fool, and a fool, right? You use the same words that we just used an hour and a half ago, and it made us feel as though Swami was the fourth person sitting there in the conversation, and kind of interacting with us in that manner, right? And of course, Swami didn't have to do that. Swami didn't have to, prove his divinity or kind of give us that message on, on a time and again basis. But he out of his immense sort of love and I'd say grace and compassion, he just allows us to sort of experience that, so that we carry that forward. We remember him, and we kind of form an impression about him that is near and dear, which is not kind of distant, that he is around us, he's within us, he is with us always. And he's sometimes just a thought away, or not sometimes, almost always, he's just a thought away rather than anything. And in one such case, I'd finished my university and all of my studies, and then I was working here, and one of my first jobs was pretty stressful. It used to be, I would say, about 13, 14-hour days, and with kind of no break, or even longer at times, and it was getting quite stressful as well. And after about a year and a half into my job, I was thinking I should just quit it and do something else, but I didn't want to do it without getting a sort of a firm signal or response from Swami. But of course, I was stuck here, thousands of miles away. And now when you pray to Swami, there are different ways he comes and communicates with all of us. So I was kind of fervently praying, because he wasn't necessarily telling me anything. And one day I still remember I was walking out of the office, and I was like literally annoying Swami, probably because I was constantly asking him, tell me. It was, I was going on having a rant at him, and it had started to drizzle. And in one of the central London areas, I was just walking towards my station, and it was starting to get wet and so on. I was just putting my head down, and I was just talking to Swami, saying, tell me something, tell me, what should I do? Should I leave or should I stay? Should I leave or should I stay? And so on. And then as I was walking in front of one of the stations, it was a very crowded pavement. It's like about 6 p.m. after work, and everyone is walking. As I was just walking, there was a business card. It was about the size of a business card. It was on my way, right on the pavement, and something told me, pick it up. I don't know how often do we sort of pick up a piece of paper from the floor, and something told me, it was literally below where my eyes were falling, between my legs, and something told me, stop, and picked up. It was a busy street, and I picked it up. It was a white blank sort of a business card on one side, and I just picked it up and I turned it around. I just had 4 letters written on it. It was big. It said wait, WAIT, right? And that was sort of a strong enough message for me to say, hold on, and just wait. And then, of course, over a period of time, things happened, and then I clocked about 3 years in my role, and then it was a nice natural exit for me afterwards. But the reason why I wanted to kind of narrate that is, when you're kind of all by yourself, you're thousands of miles away from Swami, and our usual means of communicating with him physically had gone by then, because Swami had left the mortal coils by then. And, you sometimes wonder, what do we do, when we really need something? And it goes on to show that Swami is literally just a thought away. The more we think of him, the more fervently we think of him, he not only responds, but he has to respond. He doesn't have any other alternative, right? So he has to do that. But that is particularly important in the times we live in, with so much of uncertainty. And that reminds me of one thing that Swami told in 2011, again, early Jan, when we were all there in Patti. Swami gave us darshan in the mandir, and then he went to the front, then has his chair turned around. Swami started saying, keep coming, have faith, keep coming. Very simple, and then he switched to Telugu, and he started saying, in the coming years, many things will happen, do not get distracted by those, keep coming. It was a very simple message. And at that point, it makes it appear as though, oh, Swami talks about distractions, Swami talks about all these things, maybe it is such a thing, perhaps. But then it was a very, very simple message. You come, have faith, many things will happen, do not get distracted, but keep coming, right? And that was a very, very simple and a profound message, because soon after that, we saw Swami's mortal coils go. And then, to add to that, you had the Mudanali saga, you had all the other sagas as well, and enough sort of opportunities for us to get distracted. But for us to sort of remain focused, and Swami telling, keep coming to Puttaparthi, it was very simple. We don't need to sort of worry about anything that's going on. We wear our blinds, just focus on him, try to develop that faith, and then, keep going back to Parthi. And of course, having faith in him. But one other thing, that comes to my mind, let's say, when it comes to Swami's, the physical aspect that always surprised me, as I mentioned. Of course, if it has to be something that I can't do, I can always say, oh, Swami is God, so he could do it. But many times he would do things, he could have done it with a snap of a finger, right? He could have constructed hospitals, materialized millions of dollars if he wanted with a snap of a finger. But he didn't do all that, but he kind of taught us the way. He led us into doing things so that we can transform ourselves. It doesn't matter for him to come build 10 hospitals, start curing people, and then go away, and then we will jolly well forget that he's God again and we'll be back to square one. But he wanted to show us the way, and he himself led it. He didn't make others do it, but he himself led it. And many times he goes to an extreme extent just to sort of drive across the message. And this was something that was narrated to me by one of the staff members in Puttaparthi. And it so happened that when Swami was building, building some small project or a wall-like thing around where the Purnachandra auditorium is, Swami took a couple of boys along with him. Then Swami gave detailed instructions to the caretaker. At that point, it was Chiranjeevi Rao Garu. He gave detailed instructions to him to say how it has to be built, what dimensions it has to be, and so on and so forth. Spent a lot of time giving him instructions, and he said, fine, build this tomorrow, I'll come and see. And then, of course, you know how devoted and dedicated Chiranjeevi Rao Garu was. He was short and stout, but he pretty much had the whole world under him, And he built everything. And then Swami went back the following day, taking the same, couple of boys. And then he stood there and he blasted him left, right, and center. He said, who asked you to do this? Why did you construct it this way? Whose money are you wasting? It's my devotees' money. What are you doing? You think this is your, the typical style of Swami, right? Blasted him. And then he gave him a new set of instructions to say, rip this down and build it this way, and so on. And then throughout, this person, he was, the great devotee that he was, he just sat there listening to Swami, and then he just implicitly obeyed. And then when Swami was kind of returning back to Mandir, so one of these boys mustered some courage and asked Swami, hey, it's Swami, if I may, you were the one who asked him to do it that way yesterday, and he kind of complied with your instructions, but today you kind of sort of went back on your words, right? I mean, you would want to think about it that way. And Swami sort of lovingly told them, I know that, I know that. Had he interrupted and told me that, Swami, it was you who told me yesterday, the conversation would have been over. That's it. I know that, and you know that, he knows that as well. But had he interrupted and told me, Swami, you were the one who told me yesterday, and I built it that way, conversation would have been over. But I wanted to sort of show you his surrender, irrespective of what I said. He never questioned. It's like that story in Mahabharata, right? Swami would look at a, tell Arjuna, look at a bird and say, is that a crow? Is that a pigeon? Is that a hawk? He'll just, go along. And this was an episode where, Swami was kind of literally putting it in play, right? And then Swami lovingly told, had he interrupted me, that should have been the end of the conversation. It's over. And I would have just returned back. But I wanted to show you what surrender meant. And such a beautiful episode, because Swami goes to an extreme extent, even to the extent where a devotee, a great devotee, incomparable in front of these two boys, Swami put him down in front of these two young boys, but yet he, irrespective of what was going on around him, he literally just, sat there obediently, listening to Swami and implicitly obeying, no questions asked. And that kind of shows, what, in a sense, what surrender means. And when you kind of read big texts or, chant many things, and you talk about Sharanagati or anything, those are sort of, for me, for a person like me, those are complex terms. It is easy to repeat the word. It is easy to repeat the meaning of the word. But when it comes to understanding and putting into practice, irrespective of how many texts I read, unless we hear about an episode like this, it doesn't tell me what it actually means in practice, right? So things like that is what sort of fascinated me. Even if you take Gram Seva, for instance, when Swami inaugurated that, or when Swami started, the level of detail that Swami used to go into. He doesn't sort of sit there and say, fine, I'm God, and you guys are just going to go and serve people around in villages, so you do it, and I'll just bless you. He goes into the detail of, waiting until all boys do the bhajans and leave. He waits, he stands there in the mandir. Usually what happens is, just before we depart on the first day or second day, we'll do a pradakshina around Prashant Nilayam and then go. And Swami will wait outside until the last boy has done the pradakshina and then go. And some of us, we would want to be the last boy. Because when you're kind of walking at the end, you know that Swami's eyes will definitely fall you, right? So it'll be a race towards going. And so you'll have a long tail of boys, whereas the first group would have departed. But he would wait there, until the last boy has done the pradakshina and gone. He would come and supervise, how the packing is going on, how the cooking is going on, and so on, to the extent where he would give tips, right? So once in the initial days, what happened was, when we were packing the food, Anantapur sisters used to pack, by around midday, given the weather around that time, around midday, the food used to get spoiled. And how can you go and sort of give prasad to devotees, right? And when some of them came and reported that back to Swami, then Swami even went to the extent of giving a tip to say, now, once you cook the rice, when it's hot, don't pack it. You need to spread the rice so that it cools down, then take that and then mix it up and then pack it. He goes into that detail to say how many packets, which villages, what are you doing, how many boys have come, what time did you come back, and all that report goes back to Swami, and he participates in it actively as well, right? And these are for me, fascinating, because as God, he could do anything. His power and his omnipotence is immeasurable, but yet he comes down to our level to explain something. He takes all that time to sort of, all that pain. Imagine, I would sort of put myself in, if I were to put myself in his shoes, imagine we could kind of, do things, however we want, and we have a superior understanding when compared to a 5 or 6 year old. But when that 5 or 6 year old kid comes and says, can you teach me how to draw and do that? We kind of go down to that level and do it, right? But yes, we might be able to do that. But imagine 1 million of those kids coming and standing in a queue and you asking them to do the same thing. We don't have, at least I don't have that kind of a patience, right? But the Lord, that shows how immeasurable his compassion and love for all of his devotees. Or, when I say devotees, not only those who worship this form, but worship God in any form is, right? Recently, I was just talking to someone here, and they come from Bombay, and they've been living in the Middle East for quite some time. And we asked them, how did they actually come to Swami? And she was telling that when her father, they used to go to Chinmaya Mission apparently back then, and I forgot the Swamiji's name. So he used to be in Bombay. And they used to go to Chinmaya Mission, and Chinmaya Mission used to do Bal Vihar and all that as well, right? And of course, the Bhagavad Gita, Swami Chinmayananda's Bhagavad Gita is all great reference and great source of knowledge for all of us. And when they were attending one of those programs, and apparently her father was more interested in the knowledge-oriented, on Bhagavata Parayana. So he used to be very devoted to Bhagavatam. And apparently this Swamiji, I can kind of check on the name and come back to you. The Swamiji told him and all the other devotees, you are so fixated on this Bhagavatam, but right now there is another Bhagavatam happening as we speak. Go and see that and go and be a part of that, right? And then he referred to Swami, and he actually put them across to Swami, and all of them, came to Puttaparthi, and that is how they actually started being a part of that. And just to sort of conclude, I'll again touch upon one more episode, and then again conclude with one other message that Swami gave us at one point. So this one relates to a boy whose mother was taken ill, and he was in Vrindavan at that time, and his mother was taken ill, and she was in the hospital. She was in ICU, and it so happened that sometimes Swami showers a lot of attention on certain individuals, and then when that happens, they can't leave without telling Swami, right? It is quite rude to not inform Swami if you want to do something. So he was just waiting there in Vrindavan. This was during holidays. Most of the boys had departed, so we were maybe about 50, 60 of us staying back during the holidays. And then he was trying to sort of get Swami's attention and permission to go to Bombay and see his mother, because she was really unwell. And he would try to sort of, get up during darshan or in Thai sessions and so on. But, when Swami ignores, he ignores really well. He can look onto our left and right. He can look through us, but he'll not look at us, right? And then he was trying really hard. And I still remember that scene quite vividly. And Swami wouldn't respond. So one day, Swami in Ramesh Hall, he was sitting there, and when Swami walked by, he said, "Po." Po in Tamil means go, right? He was really delighted. He was like, that was the word he was waiting for. So as soon as the darshan got over, he ran back, and he was in Puttaparthi at that time. So when Puttaparthi boys come to Vrindavan during holidays, they stay in Gokulam. So he ran back to Gokulam. He was packing his bags and to get ready. At that point of time, one of the elderly devotees who used to serve in the ashram, he went on his motorbike to Gokulam and said, "Swami didn't ask you to go home. Swami asked you to go into Trai for like an interview," right? In a sense, his heart sunk a bit. It was like, oh my God, that is not what I was waiting for. Although, Swami, you would want Swami's proximity and attention, but at that point, his anxiety was all hovering around his mother. So he came running back into the ashram, and we were all we just finished darshan. We were chatting outside the Ramesh Hall, and he ran into the ashram, went straight into Trai. And this is what happened. This shows how Swami acts, right? Swami said, "Hey, I don't know the exact words he used, not Dunaputta or something." He was like, "Hey, I asked you to come here. Why did you go away?" Then Swami materialized Vibhuti, gave it to him, took a paper, packed it, and said, "You give this to your mother," and then gave him an envelope. In that, he had a flight ticket for him to go from Bangalore to Puttaparthi, and didn't stop there. He had booked a taxi for him to go from Vrindavan to the airport as well. And then he said, now, he with his blessings, he sent this boy to his home in Bombay to sort of meet his mother, and of course blessed him with vibhuti and all that, right? The reason why I'm saying that is sometimes we, in kind of our own limited understanding and conditioning, we try to bucket Swami in that narrow, bucket we have. And we might sometimes think, oh, will Swami do this? Will Swami do that or not? But he's got a plan. He has charted each of our lives. And of course, we could all go away and ask, oh, it happened to that boy. Maybe it was his karma. It may not happen to us, right? But of course, Swami can't do the same thing to 7 billion people on this planet and billions of other creatures on this planet. He will do that through small snippets like these, so that we can then take this away and imbibe and relate to that. And again, I wasn't planning for this, but I use the word narrow. So I'll kind of mention one other thing. When I talked about this narrow, bucketing of what this phenomenon of Swami is. Once there was a person called General Mehta. He was the Major General of Indian Army. He was a great devotee of Swami. He used to come to Puttaparthi. So I had the good fortune of once sitting right next to him and observe him. So Swami came. We were all sitting in the portico. Swami came to him. And he said, "Oh, General Saab, how are you?" and all that. And he was also, "Swami, doing very well, thank you," and so on. Then Swami asked him, "So how's your mandir construction coming along? Your samiti." He was building his samiti, and I think it was Dehradun or Darjeeling. I'm not able to exactly recall. It was either of these. It was one of these military towns, right? I think it was Dehradun. And then he said, "Swami, it is coming along well. We're just waiting for you to come and inaugurate." Right? And Swami said, "When should I come?" Then he said, "Anytime, Swami." So Swami immediately, in his inimitable style, he pulled up his robe with his hand, put his foot forward and said, "Shall I come now? Shall I come now?" And he was like, "Yes, Swami, yeah, please come." And I was just kind of looking at this, amazing moment unraveling in front of my eyes. And the Swami like, "Shall I come now? Shall I come now?" And he was like, "Yes, Swami, please come." Immediately, Swami turned around and he put up a very, sorry, state and said, "But how can Swami come? No, your mandir your samati is on a hilltop. Swami is old, but Swami can't climb all the way up. You don't have a road there and all that." You should have seen his transformation of the face from really energetic to like, "Oh, but how can Swami come? I'm really old. I can't climb up the hill," and all that. So in my head, at that time, what was running was, okay, from Parthi, even if Swami leaves, it would take few hours. By the time we arrange an aircraft, it will be few hours. And then by the time Swami boards an aircraft, goes to Delhi or Dehradun, it'll be at least 10, 12 hours. In the meantime, I can get a bulldozer and then pave a road so that his car can go up and all that, right? That was my, that was my narrow thinking. But Swami, he, look at this great devotee. He turned around and said, "Swami, that's fine, Swami. I'll carry you on my shoulders all the way up the hill," right? And that was just spontaneous for him. He said, "Oh, that's okay, Swami. I'll carry you up on my shoulders." And Swami, he was so moved at that point. And Swami looked at all of us sitting around and said, "Look here, boys. You all are such small people, and you're very narrow-minded. But look at these big people. They're very broad-minded. So develop broad-mindedness. Don't be narrow. Develop broad-mindedness." And that is what when I went around saying, so many things happen to so many people. But for me, that statement of broad-mindedness was more around trying to look at others and look at all those experiences and putting myself in those shoes, in their shoes or in Swami's shoes, to kind of relate to both perspectives and perhaps take a lesson or two out of that. I think with those words, I think I've already run past the time. So I'll just say Sairam and conclude here.